In the Philippines, it is really an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
His supporters love him,
To solemnly swear.
as much for his heavy-handed tactics
He's like a father. He's a very strict father.
as they do his irreverence.
The Republic of the Philippines has a president with a foul mouth. Correct, sabi ko. I am that president.
It won't matter if people should be sacrificed for that matter, as long as the totality of the people itself would benefit.
But his critics say his campaign against drugs is taking a toll.
It actually shatters, it divides communities.
Until the last pusher and the last drug lord are...
While President Duterte is prone to hyperbole, his comments about condoning the killing of not only drug pushers, but also drug addicts, have alarmed many. The police say they take every precaution to preserve life during drug raids, but some of the people we've spoken to in frequently targeted communities like this one say that police are known to shoot first and ask questions later. In Metro Manila, the human cost of the drug war is counted at night. I went to a local police station to see for myself. It didn't take long for a call to come in. This young man was shot to death near a fish market. His father was nearby. We asked him if his son was involved with drugs. He only told us that he told his son not to get involved.
We know and we receive information that families are no longer reporting the killings. In fact, there have been piles of bodies that have been processed in funeral parlors, and families don't get them anymore because they're scared. They might be branded.
So this campaign has become so aggressive that not only if you're not a drug dealer, not only if you're not a drug user, but if you're even affiliated with somebody branded as that, you can be targeted.
Yes.
We met the widow of a low-level drug pusher who was killed in a police raid. We've concealed her identity at her request for fear she could be targeted for speaking out.
The police raided the house with the intention of killing, because if it was just a raid, they would have stated that when knocking on the door. But when they knocked and the door was opened, they immediately started to shoot.
But police say they only shoot when fired upon.
What's the mentality of a drug pusher on the street? They will always carry a gun. So when there's a buy-bust, there's a sting operation, the tendency is to use that firearm, to get away and use that firearm. If they use that firearm, we will respond commensurately.
Supporters of the drug war say it's bringing down crime overall, even if people associated with drugs are being killed.
Even if robbery is down, carnapping is down, you still have murders which are up. It's all about destabilizing, destroying the very concept of human rights. And in the guise of course, this government is only for the law-abiding, and if you're not, you don't have human rights.
Randolph Noble, The Newsmakers in Manila.
Well, for more now, I'm joined from Manila by the social media director of Duterte's 2016 presidential campaign, Pompey Lavinia. From New York, we have Philippine, who is the deputy director of the Asia Division at Human Rights Watch, and in Hong Kong, journalist and East Asia specialist, Stephen Vines. Thanks all so much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Let me start in Manila. Pompey, why do Filipinos so approve of a president who so proudly admits to extrajudicial killings, he offends long-term allies, and he really continues to shock people with his sometimes vulgar rhetoric? Why these beautiful approval ratings for President Duterte?
First of all, he has never admitted extrajudicial killings, okay? But why is he popular? He's popular because of the war on drugs. It is something that the Filipino people agree with him on. If you notice the last surveys of the two survey companies here, the Social Weather Station, 78% approval on his war on drugs, and it happens to be also his approval rating among Filipinos, 78%. So the main driver of that popularity really is the war on drugs. Now, on the vulgar language with longtime partners, it's really an expression of also the Filipinos' frustration of not having been able to chart an independent course. Foreign countries always trying to impose their will upon us, and his selection or his choice of an independent foreign policy is something that a lot of Filipinos support. But the main driver is really the war on drugs, and actually it's drugs and criminality.
Okay, let me ask Philippine. In New York, winning a war on drugs isn't necessarily a bad thing, but why do you think Duterte really isn't good for the Philippines?
Well, I mean, at first we need to clarify our terms here. And if you take a look at the profile of the victims of this so-called war on drugs, it's actually more accurately a war on the poor. And when you talk about Duterte's popularity, undeniably, you know, amongst the 38% of the electorate that went to the polls last year to vote for him, he still has strong support. But I think it's important to remember that I can't speak to the methodology or reliability of these popularity polls, but what I do know is that the government and pro-Duterte forces in the Philippines have been conducting a relentless and very sophisticated campaign of misinformation on traditional media and social media. And the narrative is this, that the government and police have killed around 3,000 quote-unquote drug lords, and every single one of those people fought back. That's why they were killed. Now, take a look at the facts. At least 7,000, maybe as high as 12,000 Filipinos have been shot down dead in the last 12 to 13 months. And Human Rights Watch's research, Amnesty International's research by Philippine journalists and foreign correspondents show absolutely unquestionably that what is going on is a killing campaign, an unlawful killing campaign by the Philippines National Police and their agents, targeting some of the poorest, most marginalized communities in the Philippines, urban slum dwellers. So there is this misinformation campaign for people not really knowing, well, what are the facts? Now, the other important issue is that in the Philippines today, anyone who challenges the narrative of the government is subjected to withering harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence. Yesterday, President Duterte threatened to kill human rights advocates who criticize his war on drugs. He has in the past threatened lawyers as well. Exhibit A of how high-profile targets can even be brought down by Duterte is Senator Laila de Lima, who called for accountability and an official investigation into the killings and was instead targeted with politically motivated drug charges, and she's behind bars right now. So challenging the government's narrative is extremely dangerous.
Pompey, I'll let you respond in 1 minute, but please let me just ask Stephen, first of all, in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Hold on one second. I just want to get Stephen's perspective, which I'll also let you respond to, Pompey. But Stephen, as one of those foreign journalists that was referred to, and as an observer from the outside, let's say, why do you think President Duterte's ratings are so high, given especially what we've heard from Human Rights Watch?
Well, on the one hand, he has a good story. I mean, in the sense he's a very effective communicator. He's a good populist politician. And he says, I represent the little man. And after all, the majority of the people in the Philippines are very poor. So if somebody comes along and says, look, I'm one of you, I'm going to be acting on your behalf. The fact of the matter is, we've heard a lot about the war of drugs, but before when President Duterte was a candidate, he spoke a lot about eliminating poverty. So you have to ask yourself, has anything been done on that front? I would say the record there is very slim indeed.
Okay. Pompey, I'll let you respond. And it's interesting to note two different interpretations. While Human Rights Watch says it's not as much a war on drugs as it is a war on the poor people of the Philippines, we've heard a journalist say that it's the poor people who like him the most. Go ahead.
Well, it's a very condescending view of that man in New York. Our academics here, our survey firms are just as competent as the survey firms in America. The University of the Philippines. And these are not, when Duterte's ratings went down, they reported it. During the elections, when he was behind, they reported it. And so there's no reason to even question that, except that it's not American. And the judge of what is legal or not in the Philippines is not somebody in New York, in a desk, but the Filipino people. Now, the biggest spreader of false news is Human Rights Watch, because Senator De Lima is not a political prisoner. She's accused of violating the drug laws in the Philippines. And we have a court system here that she herself believed in and used when she was the Secretary of Justice. So for it to suddenly now become politically motivated, we have our processes here. It's not perfect, just like the processes in the United States are not perfect. But, we do have it, and there is prima facie evidence, there's probable cause. She has not been convicted, but our laws here says that certain crimes you're not entitled to bail, and the judge in this case ruled that under that she goes to jail. Just because she's an enemy of the president politically does not make the charges politically motivated.
Okay, Philem, go ahead. I'll let you reply to that one.
Yeah, Mr. Lavinia, it's interesting how he dodged the main issue, which is the slaughter of up to 12,000 Filipinos without any due legal process. And Mr. Lavinia, it's interesting that many of those victims are children, and your president, who you defend so vociferously, refers to those child victims as quote-unquote collateral damage. But the key issue here, you can talk about popularity until, all day. There's an issue of legitimacy. And Mr. Lavinia, you might want to think about this. President Duterte was elected to defend and protect the protections and the rights within the Constitution of the Philippines, okay? He has trashed those rights and freedoms. He has thrown due legal process under the bus. And for you to defend someone who quite likely may be facing crimes against humanity charges in an international court in the not too foreseeable future, that is a dangerous situation. So, and in regards to Senator Leila de Lima, sir, it's been absolutely shown that the government's relentless, absolutely scathing harassment, intimidation, and politically motivated charges against her are totally linked to the fact that she challenged Duterte's unlawful killing campaign. The facts are out there, sir. Doesn't matter whether you try to blow smoke on them. Well, the facts are out there.
You are not the judge of that. It's the Philippine courts that are the judge of that, not you. We have our court systems here, and they will determine our fate. The Filipino people will determine how we will deal with drugs, not somebody in New York. Now, nobody, sir, is saying that nobody has been killed here, but we have a war on drugs, which the Filipino people support. Filipino people feel that it's a matter of survival. You have mayors, you have governors involved in drugs, and this is the way the Filipino people have chosen to deal with it. Now, you can have your opinion, you can bring charges to international court, but you cannot impose your will on the Filipino people.
Okay, let me bring Stephen Vines back.
Lavinia, it's not, well, just very quickly, Mr. Lavinia, it's not me in New York who's talking here. We're talking, I'm sharing with you the opinions and concerns of the officer of the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, of the head of the Human Rights Agency at the United Nations, the special rapporteur on extrajudicial killings. Mr. Lavinia, I need to tell you that there is a legal issue called incitement and instigation toward crimes against humanity. And your very vocal support for what is quite obviously an unlawful killing campaign that has killed thousands of Filipinos in cold blood, sir, that puts you in a potentially awkward situation moving forward legally.
Okay, I'd like to bring Stephen back into the conversation. We just have a few minutes left.
I do not fear. I have no fear of what you're saying. I am going to support the view of the Filipino people.
Okay.
He is our elected leader, and we agree with him.
And then
so
Stephen,
if there are charges, let there be charges.
Stephen, let me ask you, is there any line Duterte could cross that would actually turn the tide of popularity against him?
Well, that's a very interesting question because unfortunately I'm a bit old. And I remember a period in the Philippines when President Marcos, who was another, in his day, very charismatic, very populist president, who had very high popularity ratings. But, and as Mr. Lavinia knows perfectly well, he was the man who was brought down in the People's Power Revolution because at the end, people are not stupid. They understand that a president has to deliver the goods. Just filling the mortuaries with dead bodies isn't delivering the goods. And I don't think anybody in the Philippines, including whoever is in the studio today, speaks on behalf of all the Filipino people. It's a divided society, particularly in the urban areas. And there are a lot of people who are adamantly opposed to President Duterte, as well as he has a lot of supporters. But, you know, his support will diminish very, very quickly when people find that he's not delivering the goods. And at the moment, he's delivering dead bodies.
Okay. And Philim, I assume you believe Filipinos who do support him now will regret, will live to regret that support?
Well, I mean, I think what we're going to see is that we're going to see, because of the wealth of evidence, that this, again, this war on the poor, this indefensible, unlawful campaign that's killed maybe up to like 12,000 people in 13 months. You know, the facts are out there, and people who have supported this, people who have incited this campaign, instigated it, the people who have been pulling the triggers, there is going to come a time of accounting for this. So that, you know, the wealth of evidence is overwhelming. And so, you know, whether those people who voted for President Duterte have buyer's regret because they're concerned about the bloodshed that ensued, I mean, that should be a concern.
Okay, Pompey, I'll let you finish. I mean, in the long term, what do you believe Duterte will give to the Philippines through his leadership that no other leader has given before and that will maintain this popularity?
Well, the war on drugs, the fight against criminality, the fight against corruption, an independent foreign policy, which means we will decide our fate, not foreigners, a shift perhaps to a federal system. All of this really is an attempt to build a strong middle class here in the Philippines to fight poverty. And they may disagree with it, but that's the course the Filipino people have chosen. And I find it quite condescending for foreigners to try and scare us. Fine, you know, I mean, we live by our decisions. But, you know, that is the fate, that's the decision the Filipino people have made. And I don't want to make a comment about Marcos, you know, because I was a student leader opposed to Marcos, and I don't remember him entirely being popular. He was very unpopular, very, very different from the president now. I don't know what kind of false reality they want to believe just to make their narrative of the president, you know. There's almost an implication there that Filipinos are too dumb to see reality. You know, Filipinos are just as intelligent as the people in New York or Hong Kong. We see the facts. We see what's happening. Yes, we know there's 12,000 people dead. It's a war on drugs. We don't agree that it's a war on the poor. Majority of the Filipinos happen to be poor, and a lot of the drug-infested areas are in the slum areas. That's a fact. That doesn't make it a war on the poor.
Okay, Stephen, I saw you trying to speak there. I'll give you the last 20 seconds if you can finish.
Well, I'd just say very quickly, this is a false historic narrative. Marcos was the president for a long time. At the beginning of his presidency, he was very popular. Maybe you were too young to remember that. But the fact of the matter was that disillusion set in. If you were a student leader at the time of People's Power, obviously disillusion had set in. And, you know, it's a warning. On the contrary, I don't think Filipinos are stupid. I think they're quite intelligent. And in the end, they realize how badly the government has treated them. And that was why you had People's Power in the late 1980s.
Okay, Pompey Lavinia, Philim Kine, and Stephen Vines joining us. Thank you so much for being with us on this edition of the Newsmakers.
Thank you.